Hey guys, Mike the Warrior here. So this is kind of an emergency break the glass video. These past couple weeks have been a little crazy for me, and what I wanted to upload is just gonna have to take a bit longer. And this was kind of an easy video for me to do, because I'm just really stating my opinions. But as you can tell in the title, we're gonna be ranking every single Drago evolution from the Gen 1 Bakugan anime. So from Battle Brawlers all the way to Mactanium Surge. I'm not counting certain variants like the corrupted Drago. It was a short time thing, and in the context of the show, it's not really an evolution. It's a separate toy, but you know what I mean, right? For the sake of argument, there is a chance I might place it somewhere by the time this video's done, but I'm not really going to go into details about that one. If you want to know the specifics on how I'm ranking them, however, this is kind of like how cool I thought it was, how interesting are the abilities, the lasting impression, and kind of a nostalgia trip for me as well. To sum it up, when I saw this on screen, did it make me want to go out of my way to get a toy? Also, its role in the story, but without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. Number 11 at the very bottom, we have Fusion Dragonoid. Story-wise, this is the ultimate final form. His Super Saiyan 4, Super Saiyan Blue, 4th gear, Byron mode, Bankai, whatever. And from that perspective, it leaves a lot to be desired in terms of, a presence. In terms of spectacle, Mactanium Surge's final part puts a lot more emphasis on how powerful the Mectagon, the battle suits, and the fusions look. I think the official form for the fusion is called Blitz or something, and yeah, I'm not really counting that. But Fusion Dragonoid himself looks pretty lame, as there's not really a battle he can necessarily really handle like that when they're fighting the villains. I think there's about 2 or 3 where they don't fuse or use battle suits, and that's a hard maybe because I'm going off of muscle memory. But the fact that I have to try to remember, it's a little unfortunate. The best time we see this see this form of Drago and what it can do is during its debut in part 2. And it's a real shame that has to be the case, because its predecessor seems like a more powerful final form. And I think the best example is it's like how a lot of Dragon Ball fans feel about Super Saiyan Blue. Super Saiyan Blue, we know, is supposed to be really, really strong, but it just doesn't seem all that great, even comparing it to its predecessor, Super Saiyan God. And a lot of that has to do with the presentation and the presence that Super Saiyan Blue has. Outside of the anime, it doesn't really seem all that impressive. And when I say the anime, I mean the actual series Dragon Ball Super itself. The best times we see Blue is from other stuff like the Broly movie, or the manga, or I guess Dragon Ball Heroes. But to keep this focused on Bakugan, yeah, Fusion Dragonoid just leaves a lot to be desired, and that's a real big shame. Number 10, we have Helix Dragonoid. It's mainly here because of what it started, and that's the humanoid Drago evolutions. And, well, obviously we can't go back once we start that, but even with that aside, I'm not really the biggest fan of this form, if I'm being honest. But to give it props over Fusion Drago, this version of the character does have a presence, as it was a pretty decent powerhouse and only lost one time, and that was in Gandalian Invaders. For those who don't remember, Drago's final evolution at the end of New Vestroya was when he took on all the attribute energies into himself, and then he evolved. And this stayed with us all the way till the end of the first arc of Gandalian Invaders, and Drago only lost because it was a 2v1, technically a 3v1, because Rin was kind of working with them and, sabotaging the match, as he wasn't really being a team player at all. And after glaze like that, you're probably wondering, okay, seriously, why is he so low? And like I said, it just started a trend that I wasn't really too big a fan of. That's just what it comes down to. Number 9, we have Blitz Dragonoid. And it's mainly this low because of the short screen time compared to all the others. And it didn't leave the longest impression because of that. And the main claim to this Drago's name is the battle against Starak. and it's kind of a pro and a con. I think because it had such a rough showing in the battle, some people probably don't love this one as much, and I don't think that's necessarily this one's fault, as it's kind of like the Pokemon effect. The two, Bakugan, Dragonoid, and, Darak, they counter each other. It's like in Pokemon, if Dragon goes up against Dragon, well, they're weak to Dragon, so they counter each other. But I will say that battle is the only reason it is higher than the others, because it doesn't leave a lasting impression besides that. Maybe if it had a cool battle gear or something, it could have done more. For me at least, it could have done more, but it is what it is. Number 8, we have Ultimate Dragonoid, and the battle against Masquerade is probably what really puts it here, but I will be honest, in terms of design, this is nowhere cool as Delta Dragonoid, who obviously we'll talk about much later. Another thing is that this version of Drago loses some brownie points due to the power of hindsight, as it's not actually the ultimate final form of Drago. I would have been a bit more forgiving if we don't count Infinity Drago, because, that's just something that he got because of the perfect core. But because Drago just has so many evolutions after this one, it just kind of falls because it's just not his ultimate final form. And it's in the name, that's also that. But I will give it some credit, because again, we just didn't really know that. We didn't know where this series was going by the time the battle happened, and the battle with Masquerade is really, really, really good. It's one of the best battles in the entire series. Honestly, I think it is probably the best battle in the series, at least in Gen 1, because I haven't seen the other two. But it's not enough for me to put it above 8 for me. Number 7, we have Titanium Dragonoid. And from a story perspective at least, when the show came out, this form of Drago seemed overpowered. And I mean super overpowered, to the point where it was the main plot point of the first chunk of episodes of the story for Mactanium Surge. Drago can't control his own power anymore because he's just so freaking strong. Like, he's gone through so much. He's evolved, became the perfect core, got a new body, got all the attribute energies, got the element, evolved thanks to Dragonoid Colossus, and then he evolved again thanks to Code Eve. Like, he's gone through so much. So when it was revealed that Drago can't really control his power, I bought it immediately. Like, look at everything he's gone through at this point. And earlier I talked about Fusion Dragonoid being pretty underwhelming compared to his predecessor. That would be this form, Titanium Drago. He later evolves into Fusion Drago. But this Drago, in comparison to Fusion, just looks so much stronger. In terms of design, I think he has a better design, and just some of his abilities just look insane. We have Dragon Force Striker, and I believe it's called Titanium Hummer. No, I'm thinking of Wonder Superior, my bad. And every time he used either of these abilities, you just felt the weight of how powerful this version of Drago is. Like, if there's one thing Mactanium Surge definitely did right, this version of Drago seemed like an absolute beast. To the point where I understand the decision to evolve him, but if they didn't want to, because they're just like, well, where do you go from here? I mean, I get it, because, like, good grief, man. Number 6, we have Aluminum Dragonoid. I think I'm saying that right. And out of all the humanoid versions of Drago, this one is easily my favorite. I like the name, and it has this really great presence whenever it's on screen, because this Drago just seemed unstoppable. Like, the only one that could actually beat him was Darak, the main villain, and he even beat Dragonoid Colossus. And how Dragonoid Colossus goes out could be debated in terms of how strong was he really or something like that. But this version of Drago was just so freaking powerful that I was questioning, should Dan and Drago even still be the main characters? Look how broken they are. Like, he took on Rin and Sid at the same time, and it was a cakewalk. They tied that one round, sure, but then immediately afterwards he steamrolled them. And I also remember that I was generally sad to see this version of Drago go when I realized that he was evolving again. We are now in the top 5, and this was really hard for me, but at the 5th spot, I have Classic Dragonoid. Now, If you don't necessarily see this as an evolution, that's kind of completely fair. I understand. And there isn't anything really wrong with it. I think it's just a safe place to put it. It has a really simple and nice design. Drago is a Bakugan dragon, so he looks like a dragon, and that's fine. One thing that I think makes it really cool is the ability card Boosted Dragon. It, boosts Drago, but it gives him a really unique effect where the added power boost stays with him for the rest of the game, and I think that was just a really cool idea, and it made Drago stand out more compared to some of the other Bakugan. That's just a really, really cool idea. And it also utilized the rule set from this version of the show really well as well. And you can only imagine if we got a proper upgrade to that ability. Like once we get like plus 1,000. Oh yeah, that plus 1,000 is just going to stick with him later as well. Now, granted, now I think about it, I think that did happen with Ultimate Drago, but you get what I mean. I'm talking about like New Vestroya and onward, because just how different that rule set is. Anyway, yeah, number 5, we have Classic Drago. If you don't want to count it as an evolution, that's completely fair. Number 4, we have Infinity Drago. Now, when I first watched this as a kid, I didn't see the finale till much, much later. Like, we were halfway done with New Vestroya till I finally went back and finished the finale because I didn't really have cable. So the nostalgia of this form doesn't hit me as much as some of the others, but the reason it's so far up is just the story on how we got to Infinity Drago, and the fact that Drago has to tragically kill Wyvern, the love of his life, to acquire the Infinity Core, and then there's the Battle of Naga. And personally, I think this is one of the strongest versions of Drago, even if we go into the fact that this is the first season, because the standard G power that they have for Drago and this, Naga is 1,000, and it takes till the end of the first arc in Gundalian Invaders 2 seasons later for we to see a Bakugan that just starts out like that. I'm not really counting Farbros with the SL formation because that's like combining a bunch of stuff to get into there, and obviously Maxis Dragonoid and Maxis Helios would count in that as well. But yeah, Infinity Drago, it's just the story on how we got here is just so good. It had to at least be in the top 5, and I think number 4 is a safe spot for it. If you guys wanted to put this as number 1, I understand. If you guys wanted to put this somewhere lower because you don't want to technically count it as an evolution, I also get that too, but after this, it does start the trend of Drago eventually starting to get his evolutions through a power-up. He gets some type of MacGuffin that will evolve him. And while some of them are a little whatever, I just think this one is just earned because of the story around it and the fact that he had to kill the love of his life because it was the only way for them to win. Anyway, let's move on to the top 3. Number 3, we have Cross Dragonoid, and for some of you, I think this might seem a little weird as, like I said, with another form of Drago, the screen time is pretty short. All the battles involve Helios in a way, but I have to say, I was just really blown away about how overpowered this version of Drago got. Like, it only loses one fight, and that's because the Vexos had to cheat with how they were manipulating the gate card and everything. And if you want to throw in like the extra bit of nostalgia for me, when this was coming out, this is the last toy of Drago I got. Like I thought he was that cool that I'm like, I need that toy. And it's not that the others were just so bad, but it was the last one where I was like, this Drago's so cool, I have to get it. Like, I had that with all of the Dragos until now, but it's the fact that I immediately knew I had to get the toy. And I always bring up Burning Infinity, but I want to talk about that battle because I think it's also a really great way to show how strong this version of Drago is, because the previous battle with Helios never actually concluded. Like, it was kind of a draw, and then it got interrupted because, you know, the place was blowing up. So now Drago evolved, and Dan has help from Mira and Mira and Marucho, and Spectra forced an evolution of Helios because we got Mark II, and they don't really seem like they're really needed all too much by the end of it, because he goes into Maxis Helios Mark II, and Drago goes into Maxis Dragonoid. And what I think is just so amazing is when Dan uses Burning Infinity, he disassembles the Maxis Dragonoid to do it. And what's so awesome about that is the fact that when Drago originally had to use this, he didn't really want to, at least in the dub. And Helios even criticizes him that, you know, he has to go down to his level just so he can keep up with him. So now that Drago has this new power, he no longer needs it. And that little bit of storytelling, even though it's not a big deal, it's just a really cool detail. And I had to at least put it in the top 3 just because of that. Because it gives the Helios Dragonoid rivalry a bit more, you know, weight for me. Anyway, let's move on to number 2. Number 2 and number 1 could be switched, if I'm being honest. And I don't really think much debate would be caused in terms of, you know, a lot of people love these last 2 forms. But for me, number 2 is Neo Dragonoid. And I got used to seeing this version of Drago so much, I actually forgot how classic Dragonoid looked. And from the story perspective, Neo Dragonoid is the new version of Drago that we get in New Vestroia, because they want to start continuing the series, and it's the first sequel, the first spin-off, but they don't want to get rid of Dan and Drago. So Drago basically became God at the end of the last show. How do we keep this going? And power creep is a thing that eventually got introduced, and things kind of stopped making sense in terms of why are these new guys so strong. But when New Vestroia started, they immediately rectified this problem by giving Drago a new, quote, weaker body. But there was one thing that could keep you hooked with this form, and that is the perfect core abilities, or at least that's what I called them. I might do a video covering these eventually, but there were some battles where Drago would tap into the perfect core, and every time that happened, it was so freaking hype, because you just didn't know what was going to happen. Like when Naruto went Nine Tails, or where Ichigo got his Hollow Mask. Now, you know, obviously the difference is it's not technically a rage transformation, but you get what I mean. Another thing that made this form so cool was it was the fire tornado that he does, because the Bakugan spins. Percival does this too, but Drago obviously did it first in the first episode. And I remember as a kid, I had Apolloneer thinking that it was a Dragonoid. And when I saw the first episode of Vestroia, it's when I realized that, wait, that's not Drago. So I had to go to the store to get one for the sole reason that, but that Bakugan spins. I want that one. And in terms of design, like original Drago, it's really good, but the big thing that stands out to me, which makes it iconic at least for me, is the perfect core jewel on his chest. It solidifies the already amazing design and makes it perfect. Alright, moving on to number 1. Number 1, by process of elimination, is Delta Dragonoid. Delta Dragonoid isn't just the first Drago evolution, but it's the first evolution we get in the entire series. When Dan battled Chan, Drago was acting weird throughout that battle, and then it starts happening again during the 3v3 with, you know, Klaus, I think it was Julio, and Chan versus Dan, Runo, and Marucho. And then Drago realizes that he's evolving. And that battle was already amazing on its own, but what really put it so high for me, and I even had it fairly high in my top 10 battles, is the Delta Dragonoid debut at the very end. And again, the build up to the moment, because I'll never forget, I was sitting down watching TV with my brother when this happened. We had just finished eating breakfast. Klaus and his team basically had a little setup where they could all gang up on Drago, and Preyas and Tigrera were on different gate cards. Dan and the team tried to figure out a way to boost Drago's power, because he had to basically solo them, and it just wasn't going to work. They had a counter for everything. And then Tigrera activates her final card, Cut In Slayer. Similar to Cut In Saber, which adds Tigrera into the battle, Cut In Slayer transfers all of the other Bakugan on your team to one Pacific Bakugan on the field. So Preyas and Tigrera basically add up their power and give it to Drago. And I love the visual of them standing by Drago's side before they fade away, because the one caveat to this ability is that they are out of the fight. Tigrera and Preyas can't actually help Drago. It's just a, visual, a spiritual visual for Drago. Because if Drago loses, that means they automatically lose the battle, and it's a really, really great moment showing that they have his back. And Drago's power just keeps rising and rising, and I remember his eye opening up inside of the meteorite, and then he erupts and we see Delta Dragonoid for the first time. Dan uses D Strike Attack, I believe the name is, and then wins the battle. And it was so freaking epic. And it was probably the moment where I realized I want to buy a Bakugan. Like, that battle and that moment was so freaking cool. And for that reason, to me, is why it is just the definitive best evolution in the entire verse. If you disagree, I understand. A lot of nostalgia goes into my bias for this. I also like that this looks really, really different compared to Drago's other forms. Like, the head on Drago is really unique. Like, he has these other horns that are coming out of him, and it looks really, really cool. So when Ultimate Dragonoid went back to a bit more of a sleek design, I was pretty disappointed. But yeah, that does it for the video. Thank you guys for watching. Please let me know, what are your favorite forms of Drago? How would you rank them? What are your thoughts on my list? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know down in the comments down below. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. The next video might be about Helios, but we'll see when we get there. Peace.